I don't even know where to begin. Most days I wake up feeling like I'm already behind, like the world started moving before I even had a chance to catch my breath. I go through the motions, shower, breakfast, work, school, scrolling endlessly, but inside, something always feels off, heavy, quiet, constant. I watch people around me, people who seem so sure of themselves, so steady, so normal. They laugh easily, they connect easily, they don't overthink every word or gesture. And I wonder, why can't I be like that? Why am I like this? I think about all the times I've cared too much, loved too much, hoped too much. All the times I gave more than I got back. All the times I stayed in spaces that made me feel invisible. And it's exhausting to admit, but I realize I do it every single time. Not because I have to. Not because anyone demanded it. But because I think that if I give enough, I'll be chosen. I'll be seen. I'll be loved the way I've always wanted. And every time, it fails. Not completely, not in a dramatic he left way. It fails slowly, quietly, subtly. They stop texting first. They stop asking how I'm doing. They laugh, but not with me. They drift. And I stay. I stay longer than I should. I care harder than I should. And I wonder, again, what's wrong with me? It's not just about love. It's about friendships too. The same patterns repeat, the same effort imbalance, the same quiet heartbreak of giving more than I receive. And I start questioning myself. Maybe I talk too much, maybe I'm too quiet, maybe I'm too sensitive, maybe I just don't fit. Sometimes I feel like I'm waiting for myself to change. Like there's some version of me that's lighter, easier, better. Someone who doesn't overthink. Someone who doesn't replay every conversation, every text, every glance in their head 100 times. Someone who can just exist without questioning whether they belong. But that version never shows up. And I ask myself almost every day, why am I like this? Why do I carry this weight that no one else seems to notice? Why do I care so much about people who don't care the same way? Why can't I stop overthinking? And the answer never comes easily, because maybe it's not one thing. Maybe it's 1,000 small things stacked on top of each other. Moments of neglect, moments of comparison, moments of being unseen. Maybe it's patterns I learned long ago that I never unlearned. Maybe it's just who I am. But the worst part isn't the question. The worst part is the quiet ache that comes with it. That feeling that even when people are around, even when someone laughs at your jokes or texts you first, a small voice whispers, you don't belong, you're too much, or maybe you're not enough. And I live with that voice every day. I try to ignore it. I try to distract myself. I try to be like everyone else, but the question always returns. It waits for me in the quiet moments. It waits in the pauses between texts. It waits when I'm lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering why every connection seems just out of reach. Why am I like this? Why can't I just be normal? That's when I started noticing it. The patterns I never admitted to myself. The way I give more than I take. The way I stay too long, hope too much, care too deeply. I see it in every relationship, every friendship, every fleeting connection I've ever had. It isn't that I'm unlucky. It isn't that everyone else is just better at life. It's that I've been conditioned to overextend, to protect others more than I protect myself, to chase love instead of letting it come to me, to give my heart away even when the other person hasn't earned the right to hold it. I remember the first time I realized this wasn't normal. I had spent weeks texting someone who barely noticed me. I kept giving my time, my thoughts, my energy, while they disappeared into silence for hours, days. And I kept thinking, maybe they're busy. Maybe they'll come around. Maybe I'm not being enough. But slowly, painfully, I understood. It wasn't about me at all. It was about them. And the hardest part? I had been holding myself accountable for something I couldn't control. I saw it everywhere. Friends who only call when it's convenient. People who compliment you, then forget you exist. Romantic interests who pull away just as soon as things feel steady. And I realized something. I had been loving them the wrong way. Not because I wasn't capable of loving fully, but because I had no boundaries. I gave my full heart to people who weren't ready for it. And every time I left pieces of myself behind, I start asking deeper questions. Why do I stay when it's clear I'm not valued? Why do I bend, apologize, over-explain? Why do I expect someone to see my worth when they're clearly showing me they don't care? And the answer is terrifying in its simplicity. I was afraid of losing love, even love that wasn't real. I was terrified of being alone, even if it meant compromising my own peace. I had learned to equate my worth with how much I could give, how much I could endure, how much I could adjust, and that terrified, overextending version of me had become the default. But then I noticed something else. It isn't just patterns with other people, it's patterns with myself. The constant inner monologue, the replaying of conversations, the analyzing every smile, every glance, every pause. The voice that says, "You're not enough, you're too much, you'll never be chosen." And I realize I've been repeating those patterns for years. I've trained myself to overthink, overgive, overhope. And that voice has been guiding my actions long before anyone else ever could. That's when the shift begins. Not dramatic, not overnight, but slowly. Quietly. I start noticing my reactions instead of automatically responding. I start asking, am I staying because I want to, or because I'm scared to leave? I start realizing my care doesn't have to be proof of my worth. I begin to understand that love isn't a currency to spend until someone decides to choose me. And in that recognition, there's both relief and grief. Relief because I see the patterns clearly for the first time. Grief because I realize how much energy I've wasted on people who weren't meant to stay. Grief because I see how much of myself I've given away, hoping someone would notice, hoping someone would finally love me enough. And grief because I understand. Some of it wasn't anyone else's fault. It was mine too. I hadn't protected myself. I hadn't defined my limits. I hadn't set the standard for how I deserved to be treated. But even in the grief, there's a spark of something new. A quiet, steady understanding that I can change. I can break these patterns. I can start caring without overgiving. I can love without losing myself. I can finally be seen not through the lens of what I do for others, but for who I am. And that understanding, that's the first step. The first step toward reclaiming me. It starts with small decisions. Tiny, almost imperceptible changes in how I interact with the world. I stop answering immediately, not out of spite, but because I don't want my energy to be dictated by someone else's schedule, their moods, their convenience. I notice how much I've been chasing, and I decide no more. I begin to test it quietly. A friend ignores a message for hours. I don't panic. A romantic interest disappears for a day. I don't spiral. I sit with the discomfort instead of overcompensating. And at first it feels unnatural, like I'm breaking some rule I didn't know I'd written for myself. But the truth is, the rule was never real. It was fear. Fear that if I didn't bend, if I didn't chase, if I didn't prove my worth constantly, no one would ever care. So I start saying no. Not loudly, not aggressively, but firmly, internally, and sometimes aloud. No, I won't text first all the time. No, I won't apologize for feeling hurt when someone treats me coldly. No, I won't give more than I receive. No, I won't stay in a space where my presence is optional. And as I practice it, I notice the shift. A weight lifts. I'm not panicking anymore. I'm not analyzing every pause, every delayed reply, every subtle shift in tone. I start matching energy instead of overextending. I start observing instead of hoping. I start feeling my own value instead of seeking validation. It's not about being cold. It's about being measured. It's not about pushing people away. It's about protecting myself. I realize that boundaries aren't walls. They're maps. They show people where I begin and end, and anyone who truly cares will navigate them. Anyone who doesn't belong in my life anyway. I notice how differently people respond. Some retreat, some complain, some try harder. And for the first time, I don't take it personally. I watch the difference between someone who genuinely values me and someone who only wants the version of me they can take advantage of. It's a clarity I've never had before. A quiet strength that doesn't feel dramatic, doesn't feel flashy, doesn't need approval. It just is. I also start reclaiming the quiet parts of myself I had abandoned. The things I once loved but suppressed to fit in. The hobbies, the thoughts, the feelings I pushed aside because I thought they were too much, too awkward, too unnecessary. I bring them back slowly, intentionally, without judgment. And in doing so, I start recognizing my own rhythm, my own identity. And the most surprising part, I start enjoying my own company. Not because I have to, not because I'm lonely, but because I finally know I deserve to exist for myself first. I don't need constant reassurance. I don't need permission to be loved. I just need to recognize my own worth and act accordingly. I start noticing that the anxiety, the fear, the compulsion to overgive, it's still there sometimes, but now I observe it instead of letting it dictate my actions. I say to myself, yes, you feel afraid. Yes, you want them to care more, but that doesn't mean you have to give your all to someone who isn't ready. I realize patience doesn't mean tolerating imbalance. Loyalty doesn't mean sacrificing your peace. Love doesn't mean losing yourself. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, a transformation takes place. I stop being desperate for someone else's approval. I stop bending myself into shapes I think others want. I stop confusing overgiving with value. I start choosing calm, measured connection over chaos. I start giving my heart only when it is welcomed, respected, and matched. I start feeling powerful, not in a loud, boastful way, but in a quiet, undeniable way. I realize that the version of me who was lost, exhausted, and constantly questioning herself is still there. But now she's learning. She's learning to protect herself. She's learning to honor her time and energy. She's learning that being loved isn't a prize you chase. It's a state you allow, with boundaries intact. And for the first time, I can see a future where I don't feel constantly depleted by my own overgiving, where I don't stay in emotional limbo because I'm afraid to enforce my own limits, where I don't wonder every day, why am I like this? Because now I'm beginning to understand. I'm like this because I cared too much in a world that doesn't always care back. I'm like this because I gave without limits, in spaces that demanded none. I'm like this because I learned patterns of overextending when I was young. And most importantly, I'm like this because I have the capacity to feel deeply, to love fully, and to grow from every mistake. And that is something I can choose to carry forward instead of letting it break me. And finally, I realized something. Being like this isn't a curse. It isn't a flaw. It's the sum of every heartbreak, every misstep, every moment I gave too much without hesitation. It's the evidence that I care deeply, that I feel fully, that I notice what others overlook. I stop asking, why am I like this? And I start asking, how do I honor this? I honor it by protecting myself, by choosing when and how I give, by knowing that my love isn't meant to be dispersed to anyone who isn't willing to meet me halfway. I honor it by acknowledging that my past pain wasn't wasted. It was preparation. It taught me what I can tolerate, what I won't, and what I deserve. I notice the difference in my energy. I walk into a room, and I'm no longer looking for validation. I'm no longer chasing approval. I move with quiet confidence, grounded in the understanding that my worth isn't conditional. I love deeply, but carefully. I care fully, but selectively. I give myself first, and anyone who wants a place in my life must meet me there. And it feels different. The anxiety eases. The constant fear of abandonment softens. The endless replaying of moments that weren't mine to fix loses its power. I recognize that love isn't a puzzle I have to solve, and people aren't tests I have to pass. I don't have to bend myself to fit someone else's rhythm. I don't have to dilute my presence to make someone else comfortable. Sometimes I still feel the old pull, the impulse to overgive, to chase, to hope for more than is offered. But now, I watch it, I feel it, and I respond consciously. I set limits. I speak my truth. I step back when needed, and I don't apologize for protecting my peace. I also start to see love differently, not as something I earned through effort or sacrifice, not as something I prove by staying when it hurts. Love is a choice, mutual and steady. It is something that flows naturally when both people are ready to receive and give equally. And if it doesn't, I don't force it. I don't beg for it. I let it go. And in letting go, I find freedom. Freedom to exist fully without exhaustion. Freedom to care without fear. Freedom to trust that the right connections will recognize my value without demanding I shrink myself. I look back at the person I was, the one who constantly asked, why am I like this? The one who blamed herself, who overthought, who overgave, who doubted every gesture, every word, every pause. I reach out to her in my mind and I say, you were learning, you were surviving, you were preparing. and now I step forward with a quiet strength. I don't need to be chosen by everyone. I don't need constant validation. I don't need someone to prove that I'm worthy of love. I already am. I stayed when it was hard. I cared when it was messy. I reflected when it hurt, and I grew. Pain didn't break me. It refined me, and now I'm ready. Ready to love. Ready to protect. Ready to exist fully in a world where my energy is respected, my care is valued, and my boundaries are honored. And for the first time in a long time, I don't ask, why am I like this? Anymore. I say, I am like this, and that is enough. I didn't think cheating would break me the way it did. I always told myself if it ever happened, I'd leave. No hesitation, no tears, just self-respect and goodbye. But nobody talks about what happens after you actually find out. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the way my reality split in two. The version of our relationship I believed in, and the version that was actually happening behind my back. Every I love you started to feel counterfeit. Every late reply suddenly had a new meaning. Every memory felt edited. And the worst part? I still loved her. That's what messed with my head the most. I wasn't just grieving her. I was grieving who I thought she was. I was grieving the future I had already pictured. I was grieving the trust I gave without hesitation. Healing didn't look strong. It looked pathetic at first. It looked like rereading old messages even after I knew the truth. It looked like checking her social media knowing it would hurt. It looked like comparing myself to the person she cheated with and wondering what they had that I didn't. Was I not attractive enough, not exciting enough, not enough in general? Cheating has a way of making you question your entire worth. It makes you feel replaceable, disposable, like your loyalty was naive instead of rare. And then there was the anger, not loud angers, quiet anger, the kind that sits in your chest and hardens you, the kind that makes you promise you'll never trust like that again, never open up like that again, never be that vulnerable again. But here's the truth I had to slowly accept. Closing off would only punish me for someone else's lack of character. Their decision to cheat wasn't a reflection of my value. It was a reflection of their integrity. Healing started when I stopped trying to understand why they did it and started focusing on why I stayed so long after I found out. Why I was willing to negotiate my boundaries. Why I thought loving harder could fix betrayal. I had to rebuild my self-respect in silence. I had to sit with the embarrassment, the ego hit, the how did I not see it thoughts. I had to accept that sometimes you can do everything right and still get hurt. But slowly, something shifted. I stopped comparing. I stopped stalking. I stopped romanticizing the good parts and ignoring the red flags. I started choosing myself in small ways, going to the gym even when I felt low, spending time with people who didn't lie to me, saying no to things that drained me. And one day I realized something powerful. I didn't miss them. I missed who I was when I believed in us. Cheating doesn't just break trust in someone else like it cracks your trust in your own judgment. And healing is learning to trust yourself again. Learning that you deserved honesty. Learning that loyalty isn't stupid. Learning that being faithful in a disloyal world is strength, not weakness. I won't pretend it doesn't still sting sometimes. It does, certain songs, certain places, certain memories, but it doesn't control me anymore. Because now I know this. If someone cheats on you, they didn't upgrade. They exposed themselves. And losing someone who could betray you like that isn't a loss. It's protection you didn't ask for. Healing isn't fast. It isn't aesthetic. It isn't poetic. It's messy. It's humbling. It's rebuilding your confidence from the ground up. But on the other side of it, you don't just get over them. You outgrow them. After a while, the world started to feel different. Not brighter yet, not lighter, but quieter in a way that let me hear myself again. I noticed things I had ignored while I was in love. How I settled for crumbs of attention. How I excused behavior I shouldn't have. How I put someone else's happiness above my own until I disappeared. It hit me that healing wasn't about forgetting her. It was about remembering myself. I started journaling, not the I miss you kind of journaling, but the raw, unfiltered kind. Every thought, every pang of jealousy, every moment I caught myself replaying what went wrong, I wrote it down. And in those pages I began to see patterns of giving too much to someone who didn't know how to give back. Patterns of ignoring red flags because love felt safer than confrontation. Patterns of valuing her validation over my own self-respect. And that's when I realized the real heartbreak wasn't just losing her. It was losing trust in my own judgment, losing confidence in my ability to love wisely, losing the sense that I could open my heart again without it being stomped on. So I made a choice, a hard, painful choice. I started setting boundaries, not because I wanted to punish anyone, but because I owed it to myself. No more chasing, no more over-explaining, no more lowering my standards to keep someone who had already proved they didn't value me. It felt lonely at first, and maybe that loneliness was necessary. The quiet moments where I faced my own heart, raw and trembling, without anyone else's voice filling the space. That's when I started to understand something crucial. You don't heal from cheating by erasing them from your life entirely. You heal by reclaiming yourself from the shadow they left behind, step by step, day by day, text by ignored text, memory by memory, and slowly I started to feel whole again. Not like I was ready to love, but like I was ready to trust myself. Because healing isn't about forgetting what broke you. It's about learning that even after it breaks you, you can still stand. You can still love, starting with yourself. The hardest part was when the memories came back uninvited. Not the big, obvious ones. Those were easier to process. It was the small things that cut the deepest. The way she laughed at something only I understood. The way her hand fit in mine like it was made for me. The late night talks where we felt invincible. Those tiny moments felt sacred at the time, and now they haunted me. I caught myself asking the same questions over and over. Why me? What did I do wrong? Did I ever matter to her at all? And every time I asked, I realized the truth I didn't want to face. It wasn't about me. It was about her. Her choices, her fear of commitment, her selfishness. None of it had anything to do with my worth, yet it had shattered my sense of it. I started surrounding myself with people who reminded me of what love could feel like when it's real. Friends who listened without judgment. Family who reminded me I wasn't defined by someone else's betrayal. Even strangers whose small acts of kindness slowly chipped away at the armor I'd built around my heart. I discovered routines that grounded me. I ran not to escape, but to feel my own body again. I cooked meals for myself, learning to enjoy my own company. I sat with silence and didn't try to fill it with her memory. Every step was tiny. Every day felt like a battle against the ghost of what I thought we had. But I kept going. And then one day, I noticed it. The ache wasn't as sharp. The memories didn't make my chest tighten. I could think of her without feeling like my world was collapsing. I could remember what we had without letting it define what I deserved. I realized healing wasn't linear. Some days I'd stumble, feel the old grief, write another journal entry to untangle the knots in my chest. But each time, I stood a little taller, breathed a little deeper, reminded myself that my heart was still mine. I started imagining a future I actually wanted, not one dictated by who had left me. A future where I could love again, wiser and steadier, without fear that betrayal would define me. Because the truth is, getting cheated on doesn't just hurt. It teaches. It forces you to rebuild. And when you finally reclaim yourself, you understand that surviving heartbreak isn't just about letting go of them. It's about never letting go of yourself. By the time I reached this point, I realized something I hadn't in the early days of the heartbreak. I wasn't broken. I was changed. Hardened in some ways, yes, but also softer in others. More aware, more patient with myself. More certain about what I would and wouldn't accept. I stopped replaying the betrayal in my head. Stopped measuring my worth by someone else's choices. I stopped hoping she'd regret it, or that the universe would hand me closure on a silver platter, because the closure I needed wasn't coming from her. It was coming from me. I learned to sit with my own heart and tell it the truth. You gave everything, and that's enough. You loved fiercely, and that's enough. What she did says nothing about you, and it only shows her limits. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, I began to feel light again. Not the reckless happiness I once had with her. That was tied to her, and it was never mine alone. But a grounded, steady sense of self-worth. A quiet pride in surviving something that once seemed like it would swallow me whole. I opened myself to new experiences without fear. Started trusting myself again, and even let the idea of love creep back in. Cautiously, carefully, on my own terms. What I realized in the end is this. Heartbreak doesn't just take. It also teaches. It forces you to rebuild, to examine your own strength, to separate what was theirs from what is yours. And when you finally step into the life you deserve, When you carry your heart intact instead of fractured, you understand the most powerful truth. Losing someone who wasn't meant to stay is not failure. It's liberation. Because the girl who cheated didn't take your worth with her. You kept that. You always did. And that is how you heal. You used to feel like everything was falling into place. She was there, texting, laughing, sharing little details about her day that made you feel like you mattered. Every notification felt like a heartbeat, a reminder that you were seen, that you were wanted, and you believed it. You allowed yourself to imagine a life where she was there, not just in your phone, but in every corner of your world. At first, it was simple. Good morning texts, little jokes, late night conversations that didn't need an end. You loved her in quiet, steady ways. The way you remembered the small things she said, the way you stayed up just to hear her voice, the way you let your own happiness rely on hers. You didn't demand, you just wanted to be present. And then the shift started. At first it was subtle, longer pauses before she replied. Texts that once carried warmth now felt flat. You noticed immediately, but you told yourself it was nothing. Maybe she was busy, maybe she just had a lot going on, but the pattern revealed itself too clearly to ignore. You tried harder, you reached out more, over-explaining, double texting, shrinking yourself so you wouldn't take up too much space. You convinced yourself that loyalty meant sticking through even if she wasn't showing the same care in return. You ignored the little alarms in your mind, the voice that whispered that her attention wasn't yours to demand, that consistency is only meaningful when it's mutual. Then came the silence. The messages stopped, the calls went unanswered, and for the first time, it wasn't just a bad day or a phase. She was gone, just like that. And you sat there, phone in hand, replaying every interaction, every word, every moment you thought counted, and none of it made sense anymore. It wasn't about rejection in the traditional sense. You didn't feel like she hated you or even disliked you, she just left. And that's what cut the deepest. Because when someone leaves quietly without explanation, it's not anger that consumes you. It's confusion. It's the ache of wondering why someone you cared for so deeply could disappear as if you'd never existed. And then the self-blame sneaks in. You question your worth. You wonder if you were too much or maybe not enough. You replay the small interactions thinking that somewhere in those tiny cracks, you missed a sign, a warning, a chance to hold on to her. But deep down, you know it wasn't about you. Some people are just temporary. Some hearts are not meant to stay. And some lessons come in the form of silence. It hurts, yes, it shakes you, leaves your chest hollow where laughter and warmth used to live. But over time, that pain begins to teach you something you didn't know you needed. The value of your own heart, your own consistency, your own worth. You realize that giving love isn't a weakness, even when it's returned with emptiness. You learn that some people aren't capable of holding the care you offer, and that's okay. Because one day, you'll reach a point where you don't check your phone obsessively. You won't replay the conversations for hidden meaning. You won't shrink yourself to be seen. You'll realize that the silence she left behind wasn't the end of your story. It was the space for someone who will actually stay, someone who will show up, someone who sees your heart and wants it without question. And in that moment, you'll understand the quiet truth: ghosting doesn't break you. It teaches you who you are, what you deserve, and why your heart is meant for someone who will fight to be there, not vanish without a word. After the silence set in, the world feels off. Everything reminds you of her, not just the obvious things like songs she liked or places you went together, but the small, almost invisible moments. The way your mornings felt brighter when she texted, the way laughter didn't seem as easy without her around. Even your phone, once a lifeline to her, now feels like a weight in your pocket. You try to distract yourself, you throw yourself into work, hobbies, friends, but nothing fills the void she left. And the worst part, you catch yourself thinking, maybe if I just try harder, she'll come back. You imagine sending one more message, apologizing for nothing, hoping she'll reply like she used to, even if it's just a, hey. But the truth hits every time. You know she won't. It's not just heartbreak. It's a lesson in invisibility. You realize that caring too much, showing up too consistently, letting someone into the small spaces of your life, it can leave you exposed in ways you never intended. She never asked for that loyalty. She didn't notice it until it was gone. And now, staring at the silence, you understand the cruelest truth. Sometimes the people we think will stay forever weren't holding on at all. And yet, even in the ache, You can't hate her. She didn't betray you with cruelty. She just left, as people sometimes do. And the pain isn't because she chose someone else, it's because she chose to vanish. Because when someone disappears without a word, it forces you to confront something you've been avoiding. The fragility of trusting completely, the risk of offering your heart fully, and the reality that some people aren't built to stay. So you sit there, in the quiet, staring at the emptiness she left behind, trying to make sense of the part of you that still misses her. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you start realizing something else. That absence, as much as it hurts, is also proof. Proof that your heart was capable of something real. Proof that you gave deeply. Proof that when the right person comes, your loyalty and love won't be wasted. They'll be returned. Days turn into weeks and the ache doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. It's quieter now, a dull thrum instead of the sharp sting it was at first. You stop checking your phone every few minutes. You stop replaying her last texts. The way she laughed at your jokes, the little habits that made her feel so alive to you. But the memories linger, stubborn, refusing to fade. You start noticing things about yourself you'd ignored before. How much of your happiness had been tied to her. How often you adjusted who you were just to match her energy, just to feel chosen. And in that realization comes a strange clarity. Loving someone who didn't stay doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It proves you're capable of caring fiercely even when the world doesn't return it in kind. You begin to forgive not her, not really, but yourself, for expecting more, for giving more than was returned, for letting someone else's choices dictate your worth. You remind yourself that just because she left, it doesn't mean you weren't enough. It only means she wasn't ready to see it, or maybe she never would be. And that's not a reflection on you, it's a reflection on her limits, on the distance between your capacity for love and hers. Slowly, almost without noticing, you reclaim little pieces of yourself. The hobbies you let slide, the nights you spent staring at your ceiling hoping she'd text. The quiet, the space you gave her in your life, now they become the spaces you give yourself. And in those moments you start to see, healing isn't about forgetting her. It's about remembering yourself. You still think of her sometimes. The memory hits like a gust of wind, sudden and sharp, but now it doesn't break you. It reminds you of what you're capable of how deeply you can feel, of the kind of love you're willing to give when the right person is finally ready to receive it. And for the first time in a long time, you start to believe maybe the heartbreak wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of finally learning how to love yourself the way you deserve to be loved all along. Time passes, slower than you want, but steady. The nights feel lighter. You don't lie awake imagining what she's doing anymore. You don't measure your worth by whether she texts back or disappears for days. Instead, you start measuring yourself by the small victories. The mornings you wake up without dread, the days you laugh without forcing it, the moments you feel proud of who you're becoming. And then it hits you. The love you gave her wasn't wasted. It was practice. Practice for valuing yourself, for seeing the depth of your heart, for understanding the difference between someone who takes and someone who truly stays. You realize now that heartbreak isn't a punishment, it's a teacher. You remember her sometimes, yes, but it's no longer pain that comes with it. It's clarity, a quiet acknowledgement that she was a chapter, not the whole story. And with that clarity, you finally feel ready, not just to move on, but to move forward fully. You start to notice the people who actually see you, the friends who stay when you need them most, the kind gestures that feel sincere, not convenient. And most importantly, you start to notice yourself, your resilience, your loyalty, your capacity to care deeply without losing yourself. The girl who ghosted you taught you one undeniable truth. The right people don't disappear. They stay. They choose. And so slowly, you let go of what was never meant to last and make room for what's waiting for you. A love that's real, a love that's mutual, a love that doesn't make you shrink to fit it. You smile quietly to yourself. You're not broken. You're wiser, stronger. And one day when someone finally matches the depth of your heart, you'll give without fear, because now you know your love is worth being cherished. You used to be the one I could tell everything to, the one whose voice made the noise in my head quiet, the one who made me feel like I mattered in a world that always felt too loud, too fast, too much. You didn't have to try, you just were. And somehow I made you my anchor. I loved quietly. I loved in the way that doesn't announce itself to the world. I listened when you needed to talk, stayed up when you couldn't sleep, checked in without asking. I gave pieces of myself without thinking twice. And every time I did, I believed it mattered to you. I thought maybe you saw me, really saw me. At first you did. You smiled at the little things I noticed. You laughed at my dumb jokes. You asked how my day went without it feeling like an obligation. And I let myself hope. I imagined a life with you, quiet moments, small routines, shared laughs. I let my heart lean into you because you leaned back. I believed in the reciprocity, in the quiet consistency. But slowly it shifted. First it was a day without a text. Then 2. Then your voice started sounding distant, even when you were in the room. Replies got shorter. Your attention wandered. I noticed immediately because my heart had grown so used to you being there. And instead of stepping back, I doubled down. I texted again. I explained myself. I tried to shrink into the space I thought I should occupy, so I wouldn't be too much. I gave more because you had already started giving less. And that's when it hit me. The pattern. I'd been here before, in different forms, with people who didn't stay, people who didn't choose me the way I chose them. And yet, I kept offering the same loyalty, the same care, because the feeling of being chosen, even if temporary, felt too precious to let go. I began to wonder if maybe I was the problem. If my quiet love, the kind that doesn't demand attention, doesn't shout, doesn't fill rooms, was somehow not enough for someone like you. You thrived in light and energy in people, while I needed silence to recharge. Loving loudly wasn't my way. And maybe that's why I didn't stop loving you even when I should have. Because even when I knew you were pulling away, my heart clung to the idea that you'd come back, that you'd notice, that you'd see what you were leaving behind. But you never did. Eventually I stopped reaching out. I stopped explaining. I stopped holding pieces of myself for you to take. And in that silence I realized something I didn't want to admit. The love I gave wasn't enough to make you stay. And the quiet, steady, intentional love that was my everything was invisible to you. You didn't see it. You didn't feel it the way I felt it. I won't lie, the hurt is still there. It lives in the little things. The way your name pops up in my head. The songs you used to play, the laughs we shared, the quiet routines I built around you that now feel like empty echoes. And yet I don't hate you. I just understand. I understand the kind of people you are, and the kind of people I am. I understand that loving someone quietly doesn't make it less real, and being chosen by someone doesn't always mean they'll see your worth. The hardest part is learning to let go of someone who never fully stayed, while still keeping yourself open to love. I gave you my all, and now I have to give the rest to me. I have to protect the parts of myself that hurt the most, that still hope, that still care. Loving deeply doesn't guarantee being loved back, but it guarantees knowing your own heart. And that's where I start. After you left, the world didn't change. The sun still rose, the streets still buzzed, and people still laughed around me. But my chest felt hollow in ways that no one could see. I kept moving, kept showing up, kept pretending that the quiet ache inside me wasn't there. Because the truth is, no one notices quiet heartbreak. They only notice the anger, the yelling, the dramatic exits, not the way your heart keeps loving in silence even when it's broken. I realized I had spent so long giving my energy to someone else that I forgot what it felt like to give it to myself. I'd been the person everyone leaned on, the one who listened, who understood, who stayed calm when chaos hit. But I had no one to listen to me, no one to understand that I was quietly unraveling. I carried my pain like an invisible weight, hoping it wouldn't show. And I learned something important. Caring deeply doesn't always mean being rewarded. Being consistent, being kind, being loyal. It doesn't guarantee you'll be chosen even when your heart screams that it should. Some people just can't see the kind of love you offer, and some people leave not because your love wasn't enough, but because they weren't ready for it, or they never knew how to handle it. I stopped pretending that the quiet ache would disappear overnight. I let myself feel it. I let myself stare at my phone and resist the urge to text you, to explain, to plead for acknowledgement that would never come. I let myself replay our moments, the ones I thought were sacred, and mourn them properly, not with anger, not with revenge, not with performance, but with honest grief. It was in that quiet morning that I started to understand something else. My love, my loyalty, my calm presence. It wasn't broken. It wasn't flawed. It was real, even if the world didn't recognize it. Loving quietly doesn't mean loving less. It means loving in a way that doesn't need applause, that doesn't need validation, that doesn't need to be returned in the same way to be meaningful. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, I started to reclaim my energy. I learned to sit with myself without the constant craving for someone else's attention. I started noticing my own heartbeat, my own thoughts, my own small victories. I let my love for myself, once dormant, grow quietly alongside the shadow of what I lost. The heartbreak didn't vanish. It lingered soft and persistent, a reminder of how much I was capable of feeling. But I realized I could survive it. I could move through it. I could carry it without letting it define me. Because sometimes the strongest love isn't the love you get back. It's the love you refuse to let break you, even when it leaves empty-handed. And that was the first lesson in truly choosing myself. After months of carrying the quiet ache, I started noticing the little things about myself again, the things I had neglected while my heart was tied to someone who didn't stay. I noticed how my mind would wander into the spaces I used to fill with them, and I realized I had a choice. I could let it haunt me, or I could let it teach me. Being the kind of person who loves quietly, who gives without expecting, who cares deeply. It left me bruised, yes, but it also left me capable. Capable of understanding my own worth, capable of feeling without apology, capable of holding space for someone else without losing myself. I started small, a quiet walk at night, just me and the streetlights, listening to music that made me feel even if it hurt, reading, writing, thinking. I remembered that I didn't need constant stimulation, loud voices, or validation to exist fully. My calm, my steadiness, my thoughtfulness, they weren't flaws. They were my armor, my way of navigating a world that often misunderstood soft hearts. And then, slowly, I started noticing people again. Not anyone specific, not in that desperate, clutching way I used to, but in a curious, open way. People who spoke gently, who listened without asking for proof of loyalty. People whose presence felt safe, not consuming. And I realized that the fear of being hurt again didn't have to dictate every interaction. It could guide me instead, teach me to see who truly deserves my time, my care, my energy. The hardest part wasn't learning to trust others, it was learning to trust myself. To know that if someone leaves, it doesn't mean I'm broken. To know that if someone doesn't choose me, it doesn't erase the love I gave, or the love I'm capable of giving in the future. To know that being quietly devoted isn't a weakness. It's a strength that only the right person will recognize. I started imagining love differently. Not the all-consuming, overwhelming kind that leaves you hollow when it disappears, but the kind that grows steadily, quietly, intentionally. The kind that doesn't need to fill rooms or draw attention to itself. The kind that respects the space you need, the calm you crave, the heart that refuses to perform just to be seen. And in that realization, I began to heal. Not fully, not yet, but enough to know that my past heartbreak didn't define me. That my loyalty, my care, my patience, they weren't liabilities. They were the very things that would one day make someone feel home. The very things that would make someone grateful for the depth of what I offer. I didn't know if I'd ever stop being cautious, stop noticing the patterns, stop fearing the quiet pull of attachment. But I knew that I could exist fully, love fully, and protect my heart fully, even if the world didn't always recognize it. And that, I think, is where the real strength lives. In the quiet endurance of a heart that loves deeply, even after it's been broken. Eventually the quiet ache softened, not vanished. Heartbreak doesn't just disappear but softened, like a wound that stops bleeding and starts to scar. I learned that I could care deeply without losing myself, that my loyalty didn't have to be a trap, and that my quiet love wasn't something to apologize for. I began to notice the difference between people who merely take and those who choose to give back. I could see the patterns clearly now, the ones I used to fall for, the ones who faded when I leaned in. And instead of chasing them, I stepped back. I let them walk their path and stopped questioning my worth when they didn't stay. I discovered that being the introvert, the quietly devoted, the one who loves without noise, those weren't flaws. They were the lens through which I could see the right people, the ones who wouldn't mistake my calm for boredom or my need for space for distance. I realized that the kind of love I give isn't flashy, but it is enduring. It is steady. It is rare. And it deserves to be seen by someone capable of holding it with care. And then in a moment I didn't plan for, someone appeared, Not the echo of the past, not a mirror of what I thought I wanted, but someone who recognized the quiet strength I carry. They didn't demand, they didn't rush, they didn't force me to perform. They simply saw me. And that recognition, that simple choice to see me as I am, felt like home in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I realized finally that heartbreak isn't just pain, it's preparation. It's training your heart to recognize what is real, what is worth giving to, what is worth waiting for. Every tear, every lonely night, every moment I thought I wasn't enough. They were teaching me how to love wisely, how to protect myself without closing off, how to stay open without losing my dignity. I still care deeply, I always will, but now I care wisely. I offer my heart fully but not recklessly. I choose people who see it, who honor it, who don't make me shrink to fit their world. And in that, I've found something stronger than love itself, respect for myself, even in the shadow of the love I've lost. Because the truth I finally understand is this: a heart that has loved quietly, fiercely, and deeply is not broken. It is alive. And one day, that heart will be met by someone who knows its value, someone who chooses it, someone who doesn't need it explained. And until that day comes, I carry myself with the knowledge that my love is rare, my loyalty is precious, and my quiet strength is enough. You used to be my best friend, the person I would choose over everyone else. What changed? I've asked myself that question more times than I'll ever admit, not out loud, just in the quiet moments, when something reminds me of you without permission, when I hear a joke you would have laughed at, when I instinctively reach for my phone before remembering there's no point anymore. You used to be the first person I told everything to, not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because somehow your opinion mattered more than anyone else's. Your voice carried weight, your presence carried peace, and I didn't even realize how rare that was while I had it. I just thought you'd always be there. We didn't become close all at once. It happened slowly. One conversation that lasted longer than expected. One moment of honesty neither of us planned. One night where neither of us wanted to say goodbye first. And suddenly you weren't just someone I talked to. You were my person. The one I told things I didn't tell anyone else. The one who saw parts of me I kept hidden from the world. You knew when I wasn't okay without me saying it. You'd ask, talk to me, what's wrong? And I would. Because with you, I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to be the strong version of myself. I could just exist. And that was enough for you. There's something dangerous about that kind of connection, because you don't prepare for it to end. You don't think about life without it. It becomes part of you, part of your routine, part of your identity. You stop imagining endings, because some part of you believes this is permanent, that this is different, that this is safe. I don't know when things started changing. That's the worst part. There wasn't a moment. There wasn't a fight. There wasn't a clear ending. Just distance. Quiet, gradual distance. Your replies got shorter. Your energy shifted. You stopped asking how I was. Stopped noticing the things you used to notice instantly. I remember staring at our messages, rereading them, wondering if I did something wrong. Wondering if there was a version of me you got tired of. Or if you just found someone who made you forget about me entirely. And I hated myself for even thinking that, because I trusted you, I trusted us. And I tried to ignore it at first. Told myself you were busy, tired, going through something. I gave you space even when it hurt, because I didn't want to be someone you felt obligated to respond to. I didn't want to be the person you sighed at before replying, so I became quieter, smaller, less present, not because I cared less, but because I cared too much to push you away completely. And the craziest part is, even while you were slowly leaving, you still meant everything to me. I still chose you, even when it stopped feeling like you were choosing me. I still defended you in my head, still made excuses for your absence, still held on to the version of you that used to stay, because I didn't want to accept that maybe that version of you didn't exist anymore. The hardest thing I've ever had to accept is that you didn't leave all at once. You left in pieces, and delayed replies, and canceled plans, and conversations that felt forced instead of effortless. Until one day you weren't my best friend anymore. You were just someone I used to know everything about. And that's a different kind of pain, because you're not grieving a person who disappeared. You're grieving a person who's still alive, just no longer yours. Sometimes I wonder if you ever think about me, if something ever reminds you of how close we were, if you ever miss me the way I miss you, or if I became easy to forget, easy to replace, easy to move on from. Because I'll be honest, you weren't easy to lose, you weren't easy to replace. You weren't easy to forget. You were home, and losing you didn't just break my heart. It broke the part of me that believed some people stay forever. You used to be my best friend, and I still don't know what changed. I just know that one day, you stopped choosing me. And I never stopped choosing you. I think the part that hurt the most wasn't the day you left, it was all the days after. The days where something happened and you weren't the first person I told anymore. The days where I pick up my phone out of instinct, already knowing there wouldn't be a message from you. The days where I had to teach myself not to look for you in places you used to be. Because when someone becomes part of your everyday life, losing them doesn't feel like a single moment. It feels like 1,000 small losses, over and over again. I remember the exact feeling of realizing I couldn't come to you anymore. Not because I didn't want to, but because you weren't there in the same way. Your responses felt distant, polite, like you were talking to someone you used to know, not someone you once couldn't go a day without. And I tried to act like it didn't affect me, tried to match your energy, tried to pretend I didn't notice the difference. But I noticed everything. I noticed how you stopped asking questions, how conversation died faster, how I became the only one trying to keep them alive. And there's nothing more humiliating than feeling yourself become optional to someone who once made you feel essential. I started questioning everything. Was any of it real? Did you ever care the way I cared, or was I just there when it was convenient? When you were bored, when you needed someone to listen? Because when you stopped needing me, you stopped choosing me, and that realization changes you. It makes you quieter, more careful, more guarded, not because you want to be, but because you don't ever want to feel that disposable again. There were nights I sat there staring at our old messages, reading conversations from a version of us that doesn't exist anymore, and I'd wonder how two people could go from talking every single day to nothing, no closure, no explanation, just silence, like everything we were meant less than I thought it did. And silence is the worst answer of all, because it forces you to create your own conclusions, most of which hurt more than the truth probably would have. I never told you how much it broke me, how losing you didn't just hurt, it changed me. It changed how I trust people, how I open up, how I let people get close. Because you taught me that even the person who knows you best can still become a stranger, and that's a terrifying thing to learn. The truth is, I wasn't just losing you. I was losing the version of myself that existed when you were in my life. The version of me that felt understood, chosen, safe, and I've spent a long time trying to find him again. But some parts of you don't come back the same after someone you trusted walks away without warning. Some parts of you stay behind with them, and you just learn to live with what's left. The hardest part is why you didn't disappear all at once. You faded slowly, so slowly I didn't even realize it was happening until you were already gone. At first it was small things. You stopped telling me about your day, stopped sharing the random thoughts you used to trust me with, stopped needing me the way you used to, and I told myself it was nothing. People get busy, people change. That's normal, right? But deep down, there was this quiet voice in my head that already knew the truth. I was losing you, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I tried to hold on. I tried to be easier to love, quieter, less emotional, less needy. I stopped bringing up things that bothered me, stopped asking questions I was afraid of hearing the answers to. I made myself smaller, just so you'd have more space to stay. But the sad part is, you don't lose people because you took up too much space. You lose them because they were already leaving, and I was the only one pretending we were still the same. I remember the moment it really hit me. It wasn't during a fight. It wasn't during some dramatic ending. It was during a normal, ordinary moment. Something happened, and for the first time, you weren't the person I wanted to tell. Not because I didn't care about you, but because something inside me knew you didn't care the same anymore. And that realization didn't feel loud. It felt quiet. heavy, final, like watching the last light in a room turn off. You became someone I used to know, someone I had memories with but no future with. And that's a different kind of pain, because you're still alive, still out there, still existing in the same world as me, but I can't reach you anymore, not in the way that mattered. Sometimes I still think about you, not in the way I used to, not with hope, just with this strange sense of disbelief. Like I can't fully process how someone who meant everything became nothing. How we went from being inseparable to strangers with history. And the worst part is, I don't even think you realize what you did to me. Because for you, it was probably just moving on. But for me, it was losing the one person I never thought I'd have to live without. And the truth is, I blamed myself for a long time. I kept replaying everything in my head like there was some exact moment where I ruined it. Some sentence I shouldn't have said. Some version of me that wasn't enough. I convinced myself that if I had just been better, you would have stayed. If I was more confident, more interesting, less emotional, less me, maybe you wouldn't have left. But the hardest thing I've had to accept is this. You didn't leave because I was too much. You left because I wasn't enough for you. And those are two very different things. I think what hurts the most isn't that you're gone. It's that you stayed long enough to become part of me. You became my routine. My first thought when something good happened. My first instinct when something went wrong. You weren't just someone I loved. You were home. And when you left, you didn't just take yourself. You took the version of me that existed with you. The version that felt safe. The version that wasn't constantly afraid of being abandoned. People think heartbreak is loud, crying, begging, breaking down. But the real heartbreak is quiet. It's checking your phone and realizing there's nothing there. It's seeing something that reminds you of them and having no one to send it to. It's missing someone who's still alive. It's waking up and remembering over and over again that they chose a life without you in it. I don't hate you, and I don't think I ever will. Because even though you broke me, you also showed me how deeply I'm capable of loving. You showed me the parts of myself that were real, the parts that cared without conditions, the parts that stayed even when you didn't. And maybe one day, you'll just be a memory that doesn't hurt anymore. Maybe one day I'll hear your name and feel nothing. Maybe one day I'll stop wondering why I wasn't enough. But until then, there's a version of me that still exists in the past, still standing there. Still believing you were the one person who wouldn't leave. Still not understanding how my best friend became someone I had to learn how to live without. I used to wonder if I was unlovable. Not because no one ever said no, but because it always felt like I was waiting for something that never came. I gave more than I got. I reached out when no one reached for me. I stayed when they left. And somehow I still ended up alone. I watched people fall in and out of relationships like it was effortless. Like love was something you just stepped into. For me, it always felt like a test I could never pass. Every time someone smiled at me, I'd wonder if it was real. Every time someone showed they cared, I'd brace for the moment it would vanish. I started to question everything about myself. Was I too quiet, too intense, too much, too little? And the more I questioned, the more I felt invisible. That's when it hit me. It wasn't that I was unlovable. It was that I was loving people who weren't ready to love me back. People who were distracted, unsure, or too afraid to meet me where I stood, and I kept hoping patience would change them. I kept telling myself maybe tomorrow they'll choose me, maybe tomorrow they'll see me, but hope without action became its own kind of heartbreak. So I started changing how I gave my love. I stopped chasing people who wouldn't fight for me. I stopped bending myself to fit the shape of someone else's feelings. I started matching energy instead of overgiving it. I started walking away early instead of waiting for permission to exist in someone else's life. It wasn't bitterness, it was calm. It was quiet strength then, and slowly I learned something I didn't expect. Being chosen isn't about being loud or funny or the perfect version of yourself. Being chosen is about being yourself, fully, unapologetically, and giving your heart to those who are ready to receive it. I can be loved. Not by everyone, not by the people who weren't ready, but by the ones who see me, who match me, who want to be here. and that's enough. I don't need to be wanted by everyone. I don't need to prove my worth. I just need to protect it. And now, when someone finally does choose me, I know it's real. I stayed through the pain. I stayed through the doubt. And that changes everything. That's when I realized something I hadn't admitted to myself before. It wasn't that I wasn't enough. It was that I was giving pieces of me to people who weren't ready to hold them. I kept hoping that my care, my patience, my loyalty could change someone. But love doesn't work like that. You can't will someone to want you. You can't make someone ready just by being ready yourself. I started seeing the patterns. Every time I felt invisible, every time someone drifted away, I traced it back to the same place. I gave too much to the wrong people. I stayed too long for the people who weren't fully present. I tried to fill gaps that weren't mine to fill. And the hardest part? I didn't even notice I was doing it until I felt hollow from it. It hit me hard. Patience isn't always beautiful. Sometimes patience is heartbreak disguised as hope. Sometimes the waiting doesn't end in a reward. Sometimes waiting teaches you that the other person wasn't ready to meet you halfway. And then I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. It wasn't rejection that hurt me all those times. It was misalignment. It was giving to people who weren't ready, while forgetting to give to myself. It was losing myself in hope, instead of protecting the heart I still had to live with. That realization didn't make the pain vanish, but it made the pain clearer. I knew the cause, now I could see the pattern, and seeing the pattern gave me a small kind of power, the kind that whispers, I can still choose, I can still protect myself, I can still be ready for the people who are ready for me. I started changing how I showed up, not because I wanted to punish anyone, not because I was bitter. I changed because I finally realized my heart deserved protection. I stopped chasing people who made me guess if I mattered. I stopped over-explaining myself to earn attention. I stopped staying in spaces where I felt like an option, not a choice. Instead, I began to observe. I matched energy instead of over-giving it. I walked away early when I felt the walls closing in. I didn't yell, I didn't blame, I didn't spiral. I just stepped back, calm, steady, certain of my own value. It was strange at first. I felt guilty for putting myself first. I worried people would think I was cold, but protecting my heart didn't make me cold. It made me clear, it made me strong. I noticed a shift inside me. Anxiety didn't control me anymore. Uncertainty didn't steal my sleep. I wasn't desperate for someone to see me. I simply made space for the people who already did. And slowly it changed the way I loved. No more giving pieces to people who couldn't hold them. No more hope disguised as patience for the unready. Now love is intentional, selective, calm. I still care deeply. I still want to connect. But I no longer bend myself into the shape of someone else's availability. I stand as I am, and that makes all the difference. And now I understand something I didn't before. I don't need to be chosen by everyone. I don't need to bend, chase, or overgive to prove my worth. I can be loved not by the people who weren't ready, not by the ones who made me question myself, but by those who see me fully and choose me anyway. The pain didn't break me. It refined me. It taught me patience, but also clarity. It taught me to guard my heart without closing it. It taught me that being alone isn't failure, it's preparation. I stayed through the doubt. I stayed through the moments I thought maybe love wasn't for me. And now it's different. Now I love with intention. Now I give only where it's matched. Now I wait for the people who are ready to meet me where I stand. I stayed, I grew, I protected myself, and that changes everything. I can be loved, I am enough, and I'm ready now.